Welcome to the Clark County Water Reclamation District, or as we like to call it around here, the Clean Water Team. The Clean Water Team was established as the Clark County Sanitation District No. 1 in 1954. 2 years later, the first buildings at the Flamingo Water Resource Center came online, and we've been in the clean water business ever since. So follow us and take a tour of the FWRC to learn how the Clean Water Team does its thing. The first thing the plant does to start cleaning this water is to remove trash and grit in an area of pretreatment called the headworks. Here, we have several large mechanical bar screens that act like giant strainers to remove a wide variety of debris that gets picked up on its journey to the FWRC. Any debris that is larger than a pencil eraser is going to get caught on these screens, including cotton swabs, feminine hygiene products, diapers, food scraps, dental floss, candy wrappers, paper towels, branches, leaves, and generally all types of trash. After the trash is taken out, we add a compound called ferric chloride to the water, or ferric for short. Adding ferric accomplishes two things. First, it binds to any solids still in the water, making them heavier and more easily sorted. And second, it helps with the smell. The air from headworks is scrubbed using large odor-controlled biofilters. These consist mostly of large chip beds or other media. The foul air is drawn from headworks through large underground ducts and up through the bark chip beds. Inside the beds, microorganisms that live on the surface of the bark chips consume the odor-causing compounds from the airflow. The result is cleaner, less smelly air exiting the top of the beds. The water itself continues to the next part of headworks, the grit basins. Even though the wastewater has been screened of large items, it still contains small, dense debris like sand, soil, seeds, shells, small gravel, and coffee grounds. This material is referred to as grit. If not removed, grit will damage equipment or settle out downstream in the facility and create clogs. The FWRC uses multiple grit basins to slow the water down and allow any of the heavier items, the grit, to settle at the bottom and then be removed. The grit material is then pumped from the basins, rinsed, and loaded back into the truck along with the trash from headworks for a landfill disposal. When the water leaves headworks, its next stop is to enter the primary clarifiers. There are numerous covered clarifiers that are almost 200 feet around. Each clarifier holds about 1 million gallons of water. That is a lot of storage room. At the primary clarifier, the water entering the clarifier spreads out and slows down like a stream flowing into a lake or a pond. The primary clarifiers contain mechanical rakes that then remove the top and bottom layers. On the top, lighter fats, oils, and greases rise to the surface and are skimmed and removed by the slow-moving surface skimmers. If the fat, oil, and grease, which we also call scum, is what floats to the surface, what do you think settles to the bottom? That's right, the poo! At this point, we call it sludge, and it's removed by the slow-moving scrapers, similar to the scum on the surface, but this time, the scrapers slowly clean along the bottom of the basins. Once it's removed, we pump it over to the other side of our campus to our solids building, which we'll talk about a little later on the tour. The next step on the journey is the advanced secondary treatment process. At this point, all the waste that remains in the water is dissolved. If allowed to remain in the water, this waste would have devastating negative impacts to the environment. Since the remaining dissolved waste is so small, microscopic in fact, we lack machines that can physically remove it. So we rely on biology to do the work, specifically microbiology. That's right, bacteria. At the FWRC, the advanced secondary treatment is a fully biological process that mimics nature by using various types of bacteria to break down the waste and gobble up the nutrients. It's particularly critical that we remove the excess nutrients from the water, especially ammonia, nitrogen, and phosphorus, which come from human waste, food, and some soaps and detergents. These can contribute to lake mead algae blooms. Algae blooms create vast beds of bacteria. which then consume the free oxygen in the lake water. As they decompose, they can cause other aquatic plants and animals to die from oxygen starvation. That's why this biological step is so important. The focus of this process is to maintain an environment favorable to the bacteria. In other words, it's all about keeping the bugs happy. To pull this off, we need to set up multiple environments to allow more than one type of bacteria to thrive. Generally, there are two main environments that the basins try to maintain. Aerobic environment, meaning with dissolved oxygen, and an anoxic environment, meaning without dissolved oxygen. The basin tanks are broken up with baffle walls and other dividers to create areas or zones that are either aerobic, anoxic, or somewhere in between, depending on what microbes are being allowed to thrive. This is mainly controlled by pumping air into the basins to produce tiny bubbles that boost the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. Having lots of air bubbles at a high rate produces a very oxygenated, very aerobic environment in which aerobic microbes thrive. The aerobic microbes feast on certain parts of the waste. In other areas, removing the fine air bubbles entirely results in very low oxygenated water, which is favored by other anoxic microbes, which feast on other portions of the waste. To provide air to the basins, we use a series of enormous blowers. These blowers are large enough to inflate a hot air balloon in under 2 minutes. In the basins, the primary concern is making sure the bugs are getting the correct amount of oxygen in the food or waste. Our goal is to keep the entire process balanced across the spectrum of microbes and wastes. Eventually, all the dissolved waste is consumed by the microbes. The next process allows us to remove those microbes. The water flows into large round settling tanks called secondary clarifiers. Just like the primary clarifiers, when the water enters these tanks, it again slows down, allowing solids to settle. A very specific type of sludge settles to the bottom in these tanks. It's called activated sludge and consists of all the microbes that are full of the waste they just consumed in the aeration basins. Because they are full of all the waste they digested, these microbes tend to clump together and form large particles that are heavier than water, making them settle to the bottom as activated sludge. Some of the activated sludge is returned to the aeration basins to continue breeding more microbes, like a feedback loop. Because it's returned to the secondary treatment basins, we call this sludge return activated sludge, or RAS. The rest of the activated sludge is sent to the solids handling side of the FWRC for disposal. We call this waste activated sludge, or WAS. The secondary clarifiers have a set of scraper blades on the bottom of each circular tank, just like the primary clarifiers. A central drive rotates the scraper blades to push the settled activated sludge into a pump inlet where it's removed from the tank. But the water exits the secondary clarifiers over notched weirs at the surface along the outer edge. Since the activated sludge has been settled out and removed, the resulting water is quite clean. FWRC staff routinely take samples of the wastewater at different stages of treatment throughout the plant. The sampling offers us a snapshot of what's in the water as it comes to the FWRC. Due to the vast array of laboratory testing that must be completed for both regulatory compliance and process control needs, the FWRC maintains its own certified and state-of-the-art laboratory that conducts the variety of chemical and biological tests necessary. Many of the samples that we test have very short hold times, making it imperative that we have on-site regulatory testing capabilities. The FWRC is issued a discharging permit, which dictates how much suspended solids, nutrients, and bacteria can be discharged from the plant to Lake Mead. The laboratory ensures that we are compliant with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's water quality parameters. Our next process is tertiary treatment filtration. Clear water from the secondary clarifiers is pumped into the filtration facility for filtering. In filtration, the water flows down through a filtered media product called anthracite, then fine sand and gravel to capture solids, much like a sand swimming pool filter. A material called alum is added to assist in removing the remaining fine particles and phosphorus. The water then flows onto our final treatment process, also called disinfection. In disinfection, the filtered water flows by massive sets of UV lights designed to neutralize the reproduction of any further microbes. Most of the water exiting the FWRC flows into the plant outfall through the Las Vegas Wash. Water discharged to the Las Vegas Wash eventually makes its way back to Lake Mead, which means it remains available for the Las Vegas Valley to use again and again. In the end, the result of all the processes at the FWRC is clean, processed water meeting all standards for the discharging permit. Before we go, let's circle back and find out what happens to all the sludge that we talked about at the beginning. That contains a lot of water, and we want to clean and reclaim that too. At the FWRC, all the primary sludge plus the waste-activated sludge are pumped to the solids handling building. Before the waste-activated sludge makes its way to the solids building, it is mixed in these DAPs with particle-binding polymer and thickened with compressed air. It's then scraped and pumped to the solids building, where it's mixed with the primary sludge in centrifuge feed tanks. After they're mixed, they are pumped to the top floor, where they are spun in these super fast centrifuges. These centrifuges spin the sludge around at 2,300 RPMs, causing the sludge to thicken and allowing the water to be extracted. The water that's extracted is recycled to the beginning of the FWRC to be treated again, while the sludge, on the other hand, has become much, much drier. It's so dry now that the sludge is referred to as biosolids cake, or simply cake. This cake is conveyed to tanks and ultimately gets loaded out to dump trailers for transport to landfill. The FWRC generates 500 tons per day, or over 360 million pounds of cake per year, roughly the equivalent of the biggest animal who's ever lived on our planet, the blue whale, every day, twice a day. That's a lot of poop! Well, we've come to the end of our tour. We saw a lot of processes here at the FWRC, from the trash and grit removal of the headworks to activated sludge found in the biological heart of the plant, and then the advanced secondary treatment to the filtration and disinfection of the water before it leaves the plant on its way back to Lake Mead to be used again. We hope you've enjoyed this tour at the Flamingo Water Resource Center and will do your best to manage the water care cycle as a new member of the Clean Water team.